As we were saying, one of the essential elements of human action is time. All human action takes place in time. However, the concept of time that applies in economics is fundamentally subjective. It is time as the actor, each and every one of us, experiences it when he or she acts. In fact, we perceive this sensation of time as we act and complete the different stages required to achieve our desired end. We contrasted that subjective conception of time with the Newtonian, or spatialized conception natural scientists have of time. It is the fourth dimension, which is a spatialized dimension. Height, length, width, and then movement. We said that analog watches provide an analogy. That is why we call them analog watches, between movement and the passage of time. The greatest analog watch is the sun. We noted the constancy in the world of the natural sciences when compared with the world of human action, where creativity reigns supreme. As a result, from the perspective of economics, from the perspective of the actors who are the leading figures in the social process, the future is permanently uncertain. What happens tomorrow will depend on entrepreneurial knowledge that has not yet been created, and thus we do not know what will happen tomorrow. Fortunately, however, we have at our disposal some weapons or tools which help us to cope with the permanent uncertainty inherent in all human action. On the one hand, we have the very entrepreneurial capacity of each and every one of us in the sense that we tend to achieve the ends we set for ourselves, and by doing so diminish uncertainty. If we get moving to complete our master's degree, we will probably complete it, and thus reduce uncertainty. On the other hand, we have institutions, which are patterned behaviors human beings internalize from a young age in a broad range of spheres: language, morality, law, economics, and these behaviors also reduce uncertainty. We digress to talk about the dizziness provoked in us by our own creative, entrepreneurial nature. It is this nature that makes the future uncertain, and in our dizziness lies the origin of much of the antisocial behavior we see, because people insist, we insist, on having the future guaranteed. This may also explain why many people rely on the illusion of papa state to resolve and eliminate all possible uncertainty. We do not mature into the free, responsible people we are capable of being. We have the capacity to accept our own creative, entrepreneurial nature, our own creative nature. We wrapped up the lesson the other day by distinguishing between two different concepts of probability. One applies to the world of the natural sciences, and the other to that of human action. In the world of physics, of the natural sciences, we encounter the concept of class probability. These are the words Mises uses to define the concept in human action, and they indicate that we know the behavior of the class, but not of its individual members. In the world of the natural sciences, there is risk, because we know or can know, by applying Bayes' theorem, the alternatives and the probability distributions. In fact, all scientific advancement consists of seeking that knowledge. Risk is insurable, for since we know or can come to know the behavior of the class, we can spread out the risk among the members. We considered the example of a mortality table. We know that 3 people out of every 1,000 who are 40 years old are going to die. We do not know the first and last name of those 3, but if everyone contributes €1, there will be capital available for the beneficiaries. We saw that there are different ways of approaching class probability. There is the logical concept, the number of favorable cases divided by the number of possible cases. There is also the frequency concept. Assuming I have a fair coin, if I toss it in the air 1,000 times, the outcome will tend to be heads half the time and tails half the time. The concept of class probability is the object of research in the natural sciences. All advancement in the natural sciences is geared towards such discoveries as the probability of life on Mars, etc. In contrast, there is the probability of a unique case or event. In the world of human action, we deal with unique, historically unrepeatable events. There is no class. For example, we cannot state that out of every 1,000 marriages, 40% will end in divorce. Instead, each marriage is a unique, historically unrepeatable event. Each spouse has a specific first and last name, has had distinct experiences, comes from a particular background, and is historically unrepeatable. In the universe, there will never be anyone just like either spouse. Not today, not ever. As for the probability of a unique event, we know something about what we think will happen, for instance with that marriage or with a specific company. And there are other factors we do not know, but which also influence the result. We call this a situation of uncertainty, because, among other reasons, the actions of the people involved will lead to one result or to another. Uncertainty is not insurable, because there is no class to enable us to spread out the supposed risk, which actually does not even exist. Case probability, the probability of a unique case or event, is constantly taken into account by entrepreneurs and historians. It is also true that in the world of the natural sciences, very often we do not know the alternatives nor the probability distributions. However, scientific advancement consists of conducting research via a wide variety of procedures, laboratory experiments, space probes, etc., and thus gaining information which permits us to approach an objective probability that exists but is unknown to us. There is a procedure. We apply conditional probabilities and Bayes' theorem, which explains how, as we acquire knowledge, we asymptotically approach an objective probability, which is already there but is unknown to us. Initially, we might have asked 100 years ago, is there life on Mars? We have no idea, so let's begin by positing that there is a 50% chance. Since we know nothing, we will assume it is 50%. But then we start to send out probes. We find there is water or not, etc. And we gradually adjust our estimate and conclude, no, the probability of life is closer to 10 or 5 or 4%. Or we know for certain there is no life. We gradually approach, though in probabilistic terms, objective knowledge, which is already there. However, in the world of human action, there is no such thing. In the world of human action, each new creative act by which new information about ends or means is entrepreneurially discovered alters in a radical divergent manner the person's entire map of knowledge. This is what we will call surprise. In other words, in the sphere of human action, what exists is a continual surprise, and I am surprised. I am surprised when I witness another's creative act, or I even surprise myself when I discover an opportunity I was unaware of before, or I am surprised when I see a young attractive woman and I'm drawn to her, or I am surprised when I see in the market a product new to me that I like. Surprise! There is no asymptotic approach to an objective probability, because each act of entrepreneurial discovery changes or revolutionizes the whole framework of information or subjective knowledge that human beings possess and use. That is why in the book I state that there is a radical divergent change in the actor's entire map. Map in quotation marks, because the rigidity of language restricts our ability to express these highly abstract realities. But this is a rather illustrative way of expressing the idea, a radical divergent change in the actor's entire map of beliefs and knowledge. That is, we constantly discover new situations, new opportunities that we were completely unaware of just a fraction of a second before, even if they were right in front of us. Yet it is not that they are in front of us and we discover them, it is that we create them from nothing. And I have already described to you the very mysterious creative process which takes place in the human mind. We creatively recombine bits of our memories in the form of imagination or expectations for the future. And we attach a value to these as ends which attract us and motivate us to act. The concept of serendipity is also important and closely related to entrepreneurship. Horace Walpole coined the term serendipity. We have already seen that the English language is very flexible, and that new words are constantly being proposed, and that sometimes they are well received and become established and are adopted into the language. In a letter to a friend, Walpole explains how the idea for the term serendipity first occurred to him. He refers to a story of Persian origin called the Three Princes of Serendip. Serendip, or Sarandib, is the Persian name for Sri Lanka, formerly Ceylon. In this Persian fairy tale, it is curious that the characters are always accidentally discovering things of great value to them, things they were not deliberately seeking. So by analogy, Walpole proposes the term serendipity, which is translated into Spanish as serendipidad, and means precisely this: the entrepreneurial capacity of human beings to find things of great value to them, to discover or create things of great value to them without having deliberately looked for them. So if you are looking for one thing and you suddenly find something else, something different from what you were looking for but very valuable, and you are capable of noticing that and of changing your course of action, you are demonstrating your capacity for serendipity. Therefore, it is not that human beings as entrepreneurs simply discover or create ends that seem valuable and then, like automatons, head straight for them with blinders on. Instead, the action process, which involves completing successive stages, is a process in which we are always creatively aspiring to discover, both inside and outside ourselves, new information which might lead us to change directions at any moment. Christopher Columbus set out on his voyage in search of the East Indies in Asia, and instead he discovered a continent in between that he did not know even existed. He died convinced he had reached the East Indies, and in that he showed a lack of serendipity. At any rate, he was followed by other navigators, Amerigo Vespucci, etc., who were also in the service of the Spanish crown, and were fully aware that a different continent had been discovered, a significant act of serendipity. To a great extent, your success in the future will depend on your creative, entrepreneurial ability to keep up to date, to be alert, to discover what is in your best interest, and to find the means of achieving it. It will also depend to a considerable extent on your ability to be open to surprises, and to develop your capacity for serendipity. Incidentally, I'm going to digress a moment to criticize the approach of my colleagues who are professors of scientistic neoclassical economics. When I accuse them of excluding time from their models, they counter by saying, "What do you mean, Jesus? My models are dynamic." To which I reply, "They are? Prove it." And they say, "I'll prove it to you." They then proceed to outline their model like so, and they insert a series of subscripts. And they say that T1 is the state of the model at moment 1, T2 at moment 2, T3 at moment 3. And of course, when they tell me that, I say to myself, because that is a joke. That is a spatialization of time. It may calm their suspicion that their models are not dynamic, but they are simply spatializing time. This is like I explained before. They are confining the praxeological time of human action to a concept that is foreign to it and belongs to the world of the natural sciences, and they are doing so by spatializing time. So even though they call their models dynamic, they are actually deterministic models, in which the future is given. It is already there. It merely has to arrive, to come. It is a future to come, not to be made. Yet my colleagues' minds are at rest, because they have their time subscripts below their corresponding variables. This has absolutely nothing to do with the concept of creative time, in which human beings act as entrepreneurs. This is the concept of time we economic scientists should be studying. So when you see these models with their subscripts, have a good laugh. The next essential element of the idea of human action is that of cost. Another pivotal concept around which economic science has revolved since its inception. Cost is a value, and therefore it is subjective. Cost is a value attached to an end, but take note, it is not attached to the end the actor is pursuing. Instead, the cost is the value we as actors attach to the end we give up when we decide to direct our action toward a particular end. I repeat, whenever we undertake an action, we intend to accomplish an end that has value for us. When we choose a course of action, we always simultaneously give up the chance to accomplish other alternative ends. These are ends we could achieve with the same means available to us, but we give up the chance to achieve them because we consider a priori that the worthwhile end is the one we are pursuing. Well, the value we attach not to the end we are pursuing, but to the ends we relinquish when we act, is what we will call our cost. All human action involves sacrifice. Human beings assign a subjective value to those ends we give up, and that subjective value is what we will call our cost. And that conception of cost is fundamentally subjective. For each actor's cost will depend on his or her subjective valuation of what is relinquished. This is the concept of opportunity cost, which is the term generally used in neoclassical economics. And it refers to the subjective valuations attached to the alternatives or ends that are given up when we decide to act. It is very important to understand not only that the cost is subjective, like any value, but also that costs are never given. Therefore, there are no cost functions, not for average costs, nor for marginal costs. And if you pick up a book and see a cost function, or somebody tells you there is such a thing as a cost function, it is a lie. And why is that? It is very simple. As we have said, ends are not given, in the sense that the actor is constantly creating or discovering them ex novo, from nothing, as he or she acts. And subjective values, which we defined as the more or less psychically intense appreciation that the actor assigns to his end, are also constantly changing. Therefore, neither ends nor values are given. They are not data, except in the warped minds of my colleagues, the mathematical economics professors, who are truly unbalanced and should all be placed in rehabilitation centers where, snap, they could take a photo of the world and imagine that ends become data and do not change, nor do valuations change. And in fact, they can even be measured from the outside. If neither ends nor valuations of ends are given but change continually as a result of humans' innate creative capacity, then costs cannot be given either, since costs, as I have just defined them, are subjective valuations attached to alternative ends. They are not given, nor can they be measured from the outside. In fact, when we act, because there is an end that is worthwhile to us, and we are in the process of imagining the stages to be completed and seeking out means to enable us to achieve our end, and we are completing the stages and experiencing the flow of subjective time as we approach the final stage, we are not moving as if we were robots or penguins. Instead, we are casting creative glances over our shoulder to spot the emergence of any alternative ends we are in danger of giving up, though they are worth more than the end we are pursuing. If that is the case, we may need to turn the wheel and change direction. I find the notion of being like robots or penguins funny, because my neoclassical economics colleagues teach about an ideal, and the example they offer of their ideal is the representative agent, who is like a penguin. Have you ever seen penguins walk? And all the other penguins follow behind? Haven't you seen this in documentaries? Well, that is the model of human being my colleagues use to explain economics. Their models make no sense if they do not transform human beings into robots, into robotic penguins. With robotic penguins who have no capacity for creativity, these mathematical models work just fine. However, when there are creative human beings capable of composing Schubert's Unfinished Symphony, or writing Cervantes' Don Quixote, or doing the stain paintings of Tapies, or devising a new operating system, or introducing the assembly line as Henry Ford did, acts of pure entrepreneurial creativity, such creativity cannot be restricted to the static models. These models have been poorly copied from the world of physics, and an attempt has been made to apply them up to now in the sphere of economics, with tragic consequences for society. Among other consequences, these models almost inevitably end up being used in support of social engineering, in which scientists believe they can and should shape society at their whim, as if it were made of modeling clay, to achieve ends they view as noble. The result is that instead of achieving those noble ends, they destroy the process of social cooperation, they block creativity, and they paralyze the advancement of civilization. That is the theorem of the impossibility of socialism, and we will examine it in extenso in due time. We all act because we expect to achieve an end, which once achieved will be of greater value to us than the ends we have given up. Let us imagine that I have discovered or created an end, and I have decided that it is worthwhile and of great value to me, and I have chosen to pursue it. Come wind or weather, I plan the stages, complete them, and seek out means. I am always looking out of the corner of my eye as I progress, to catch the emergence of any other ends of higher value, to avoid making a mistake. Even so, if I fail to discover such ends, or to perceive that they are of higher value, though I might realize my error a posteriori, and I continue to move forward, though I am incurring costs, since I am giving up alternative ends as I move forward, when I culminate the process and achieve my end, I can draw a comparison between the value I have attached to the end I have achieved and the value I have given up. That is, between the value I attach to the achieved end and the costs I have incurred. If the comparison is positive, I have generated an entrepreneurial profit. If, in contrast, once I have completed my action, I believe the value of what I have given up, the value I have assigned to the ends I have relinquished, in other words, the cost, has exceeded the value attained, then I have suffered an entrepreneurial loss. Entrepreneurial profits and losses make the world go round. These signs drive the market and further the advancement of civilization. A profit indicates that I have acted correctly. Why? Because I have used means to accomplish the end I value most. However, a loss indicates that I have acted incorrectly. Why? Because with the means I have used to achieve my end, I could have achieved other ends that are of greater value to me. Thus, a loss always indicates a poor use of the actor's scarce resources. A profit in any company indicates that those in charge are acting correctly, in accordance with the desires of consumers. The company should continue along the same investment lines, because with their actions, consumers are saying, keep it up. The value of what you are doing exceeds the costs you are incurring. In contrast, if a company suffers a loss, the message it is receiving is, you are using society's extremely scarce resources, labor, specialized or unspecialized personnel, cement, engineering, computers, etc., when consumers value these resources much more highly in other lines of production. Therefore, it is vital that you hit the brakes and turn the wheel. You must halt that investment project and redirect scarce resources toward viable lines of investment. And it is thanks to the essential signals provided by entrepreneurial profits and losses that the market process moves forward. Furthermore, both profits and losses are necessary. Profits attract, like a magnet, the actions we should perform, and losses repel the actions we should avoid performing. Without entrepreneurial profits and losses, we would be incapable of directing our actions. The profit motive, which many moralists have so attacked, is the inherent force that drives all human action. This force is one of the most typical characteristics of our nature, the nature with which we were created. It is not possible to even conceive of a human being who does not pursue the profit motive in any sphere in which he or she acts. For example, Mother Teresa of Calcutta. She is going to be the paradigmatic example I give of an entrepreneur throughout the course. precisely to show that economic theory can be applied to any action, regardless of the ends pursued. We will see that Mother Teresa of Calcutta was a marvelous entrepreneur who sought to achieve profit in all her actions. And the more profit, the better in subjective terms. To attack the profit motive is to attack human nature itself, because the whole point is simply that when we act, at least a priori, we all try to accomplish ends of greater value than those we give up. It can also happen that a posteriori, when we look back, we realize we have made a mistake, that we have incurred costs, or we have relinquished ends of greater value than the end we have achieved. We have suffered a loss. However, the signs are there to guide our future actions and also to enable us to discern the result of our past actions. We will see that in a market economy, economic calculation is possible due to market prices, which are historical ratios of exchange, expressed in monetary units. In the absence of a free market, money and property rights, it is not possible to establish the prices which enable entrepreneurs to calculate the profits or losses expected from each action. Without a free market, without money, without private property, without free market prices, economic calculation is impossible. That is why real socialism disappeared. That is why no socialist economy can compete with a market economy. Today we have gone straight to the heart of the matter by subjectively defining cost as an essential element of human action and the profit motive as the basic principle that drives human action. Even though we all undertake our actions with the intention of obtaining a profit, the future remains ineradicably uncertain, and there will always be a doubt about whether or not we will obtain a profit. You will tend to achieve one if you make an effort and act with great entrepreneurial alertness. That there is no guarantee. In fact, people commit pure entrepreneurial errors all the time. I commit an entrepreneurial error when I believe, a priori, that the end I am pursuing is the most important, and I choose the means, and I leap into action, believing that the costs I am taking on are worth it. But once I have completed the stages, or even before, I realize I have made a mistake. I discover an entrepreneurial error whenever I realize that the cost, the value of the ends I have given up, has exceeded the value of the end I have achieved. When, a priori, we are looking ahead to an action, we always have the intention of making a profit, but we can still commit entrepreneurial errors and notice a posteriori, when we look back, that we have sustained a net loss. Therefore, we could say that by definition, all human action is rational. I repeat, all human action is rational. You may be thinking, what is the professor saying? I know plenty of irrational people. No, ladies and gentlemen, you do not. All human action, by definition, is rational. In what sense? In the sense that a priori, human beings always act with the intention of achieving ends of greater value than the costs they plan to take on. The fact that all human action is rational by definition is perfectly compatible with entrepreneurial error and our realization, in a context of uncertainty, that we have made a mistake. Okay, let's say I'm a drunk. I've ruined my life with alcohol. I've split with my wife. My kids don't love me anymore. I got fired from my job. I have destroyed myself. So I go to Alcoholics Anonymous. We have group therapy, and we all tell each other our troubles and how we became addicted. Well, after the therapy session, I leave completely convinced that the worst thing in the whole world is the drug of alcohol, and that I'm never going to drink another drop of it ever again. I leave, and there, right on the corner, is a bar. And in the window, I see a bottle of whiskey. So I go straight in and get drunk. I ask you, am I irrational? Yes? No, not at all. I am perfectly rational. I have simply changed my mind. In scientific terms, every human action is rational by definition. For example, a suicide victim. Is a suicide victim irrational? Suicide victims are quite rational, and they are fed up and want to end it all. means they look for a gun, or they go to the top of a tall building and jump off. Perfectly rational. Ends, means, value, utility. It is also true that when they hit the ground, they may look back and say, damn, my costs exceed the value of this. I've suffered an entrepreneurial loss. That much we do not know. But the action? Perfectly rational. There is another concept of rationality. It is also narrow and unquestionable, but less so. And Mises subscribes to it on occasion. Mises says that in a socialist system, there can be no rational action, nor any rational economics. His concept of rationality is as follows. An action is rational if, when the actor performs it, he or she has the knowledge necessary to complete it. So Mises says that since socialism prevents the entrepreneurial flow of creativity, the flow of the first-hand information necessary to give a coordinating quality to human actions, action is irrational. However, these definitions of rationality are narrow and scientifically imprecise. I repeat, all human action, to the extent that it is deliberate human behavior, is by definition rational. I have to laugh when in economics debates, mathematical economists complain that people do not behave rationally. My model hasn't worked because people don't behave rationally. And I think, ha! Your model hasn't worked because people always behave rationally, and your model is a piece of crap. They blame people. They blame society for the fact that their model is not applicable. That's ridiculous. Let's be reasonable. They are probably the ones at fault, because they are using analytical tools that cannot be used to study phenomena in which human creativity plays a leading role. Such phenomena are the object of study in economics. Perfectly rational. And now that we are in the midst of an economic crisis, we often hear economic agents are irrational because they are saving rather than consuming. So every household is saving, and every company is saving. And it turns out those in charge are all idiots. And the only smart person is the one in office or the economist with his model. No, every human action is rational. And in this case, if people are saving, it is because that is what they want to do. Furthermore, it is what they should do to clean up their balance sheets, pay back their loans, and lay the foundations for the subsequent recovery. This is important because it is one of the huge differences between the approach to economics we teach here and what has been the standard approach to economics up to now. The standard approach began in the last century and has now entered a crisis. This approach is taught using mathematical models, and you will study it next year. Nearly everything you will study next year is a lie, but learn it, okay? It is necessary to gain a good command of the language which is often used, especially in scientific articles, parliamentary debates, etc. Fortunately, I will make sure that in your first year you receive the necessary vaccine against the virus you'll be exposed to next year. According to Mises, human action is an ultimate given. To economic scientists, human action is the most primary phenomenon, and there is no use searching beyond it for one more fundamental. It is the subjective quality of human action with regard to establishing ends, making valuations, and searching for means that makes economics an objective, universally valid science. Though on the surface, this may seem paradoxical. Austrians have expressed the discipline in purely formal terms: ends, means, value, cost, time. And the laws and conclusions that follow are applicable to any human action, regardless of the sphere in which it is carried out. When the fledgling science of economics emerged and took its first steps, the discipline revolved around a historical ideal type, the Homo economicus. The Homo economicus was an abnormal being. He was a sort of Calvinist who carried around a little notebook. The only thing he cared about was making money. He would write down a pound, a shilling, another shilling, another shilling. He wanted to make money. He was like the Disney character Scrooge McDuck. Who remembers him? What did Scrooge McDuck used to do? Pile up all his coins and spend his time counting them. Well, that was the Homo economicus. So, the first theoretical formulations, especially in the English-speaking world among classical economists, who were quite disoriented, Adam Smith and his followers, who incidentally provided the basis for Marxism and the theory of exploitation and other grave errors, the first formulations showed a belief that the economy responded to robotic human beings like Scrooge McDuck, who were only motivated by financial concerns. Obviously, classical economists left themselves open to criticism in several areas from any critic of the new science, because it is clear that human beings are motivated by more than money. Other ends, for example, altruistic ends, motivate them as well. It was not until the subjectivist revolution led by Karl Menger, the founder of the Austrian school, that the discovery came to light that economic science deals mainly with human actions, regardless of the ends pursued. Someone need only value these ends and seek out means to achieve them. It is precisely to call attention to this subjective nature, to the fact that the actor pursues ends chosen by him or her, and not by someone else from the outside, and the same for valuations, costs, etc. In fact, the discovery of this subjectivist conception of economics, the shift in focus of the entire discipline to the human actor, who drives the whole social process, is what transformed economics into a universally valid science. A science with objective validity in all spheres. As I was saying, it is precisely to call attention to this subjective nature that I offer as an example of an entrepreneur. It would be very easy to hold up Bill Gates or Henry Ford. I offer Mother Teresa of Calcutta. As you will see, she is a textbook example of an entrepreneur in the sphere she chose and valued, that of helping the most needy, those who have been abandoned by everyone, the sphere of philanthropy. I will conclude with a philosophico-methodological reflection. Human action is an ultimate given, and many Austrian economists consider it an axiom, axiomatic knowledge, that is, a starting point we cannot criticize without contradicting ourselves. And in fact, it is an axiom. Let us imagine that one of you raises a hand and says, "Professor, I don't agree with anything you've said. That bit about human action being the starting point of everything, an ultimate given, that's silly nonsense." Let us think a moment. What would a student who raised a hand and stated this objection be doing? He or she would be acting. The end pursued? To point out what he or she believes to be an error in my argument. The means? The student raises a hand, waits to be recognized, and then speaks. He or she is acting. Therefore, the student is incurring an unresolvable self-contradiction, because he is criticizing something he himself must do in order to voice his criticism. The student is acting. That is why we consider human action to be axiomatic knowledge. However, others will say it is primarily empirical knowledge, since by introspection, despite the difficulties and the restraint of language, and despite the abstract nature of the knowledge we are discussing in class, all of us, as acting human beings, know perfectly well firsthand what is meant by ends, means, costs, time, etc.